today we're gonna do another kind of hodgepodge of problems. And then we just have today and Monday. So we're not testing on this, we're just kind of exposing you to it so that you can see how you are going to do on the MCAs. Again, for you guys, the MCAs are really important because for you guys, you're trying to get into college math classes, because after next year, when you take Advanced Algebra 2, the only classes we have left are college. So you have to get a certain amount on your MCA test to be able to take those. So that's why it's important for you guys to do well on this. There's also opportunities, like when you take your FastRidge tests, that's another opportunity to get into the college classes. But hopefully with the review we've done, you guys will get into that. The reason the black is up here is because we're doing the MCA in here, and you can't have any math stuff on the boards at all. Okay, so we are going to today talk about some stuff we've talked about before, some new stuff. So here what we have is a chest of drawers, and it says the height of the drawers will form a geometric progression, which is also a sequence. And this was our formula that we learned about that. And it has a common ratio of 1.5. So that is our B, okay? So it'd be f of x equals, A is where it starts again, which would be 6. And then B is 1.5. And then it would be to the x, okay? Now it says the chest will have 4 drawers. If the top drawer is 6 inches high, how high is the bottom drawer? Now you could do this 2 different ways. You could use your formula and do 6, 1.5. And if there's 4 drawers and they're looking for the height of this, what would I put up here? 3, 1 less than, right? So then I would go back here and I'd go 6 times 1.5 to the third, and that would be 20.25, okay? Which is right here. Another way that you could have done it is each time you're multiplying by 1.5. So you could have just taken your calculator and gone 6 times 1.5, which is 9. And then you could go 9 times 1.5, which is going to be 13.5, I believe. And then you can go 13.5 times 1.5, which would give you the 20.25 also, okay? So you can do that one of 2 ways. All right, this one here is a little bit harder, okay? So here it says the table shows the terms in a geometric sequence. What is the 8th term of the sequence? Now, you can't just go in this one and divide 50 divided by 2 to find what that common ratio is, because this is the 3rd term. We do not know what the 2nd term is, nor do we know what the 4th or the 5th term is, okay? And they want the 8th. So this one you kind of have to think about. If the first term is 2 and the 3rd term is 50, can you guys think of something that I could multiply 2 by, and then I could multiply that by that same number and get 50? 5, very good. If I went 2 times 5, that gives me 10. 10 times 5 gives me 50. So I don't really know any other way to explain that, but to just kind of try to think about what could I multiply those by. And then you could just keep going, multiplying by 5, that would be fine. Or what we could do is we could go f of x equals the starting point is 2. We're multiplying by 5. And if we want the 8th term, it would be to the 7th power. So we could go 2 times 5 up arrow 7, and I get 156,250. But again, I could have just stayed here and kept multiplying by 5. Okay? All right, now, this one, we talked about associative and commutative yesterday, okay? What they want you to do here is figure out, what did they do from here to here? What property did they use, okay? Did they just move the parentheses? No, right? What did they do? They flipped them. Yeah, they took those two and flipped. What is that called? Commutative, yeah? And then from here to here, did they just move the parentheses? Yes, okay? So when you do associate, oh, I probably shouldn't leave it like that. When they do associative, do you guys understand your order of your things stays the same? They just move the parentheses. With commutative, you're actually flipping the two things around. So this one is commutative, then associative. Okay. Now if we look here, this is kind of like an algebra proof a little bit. So they're going from here to here and asking you what property it is. And these are what you get to choose from. What did they use from here to here? Distributive, very good. Okay. How about from here to here? Do you see what changed? Didn't they switch those two so it's commutative? Okay. Now, from here to here, what they did is kind of the backwards distributive property. I don't know if you guys have done this much in algebra, but did you last year do like factoring out an x? Do you remember that? If there's an x in each of them, you can take that x out, and then you think x times what gives you 3x, that's 3. X times what gives you 7x, that's 7. So when you go from here to here, okay, that's distributive again, but it's kind of the backwards distributive property. Okay. All right, now let's go here. And this one is a word problem where you're going to write 2 equations, and then we're going to decide, are we going to use substitution or elimination? So first of all, it says Carrie has 3 times as many CDs as Ron. Carrie and Ron have a total of 24 CDs. How many CDs does Carrie have? So here's how I would do this. I would let C equal the number of CDs that Carrie has. Okay. Then I would let R be the number of CDs that Ron has. Okay. Now we have to write an expression for each of these. And when you think about this, it says Carrie has 3 times as many as Ron. So Carrie's is being compared to Ron's. So I would let Ron just be R, okay? And then Carrie's would be 3 times R. Do you guys get that? Okay. Actually, you know what? I don't even have to do it that way. I'm gonna do this. I have to write an equation with it. So I'm gonna do it like this. Carrie, which is C, has 3 times as many as Ron. So we'll write that instead. Okay? Then Carrie plus Ron should equal 24. So we're gonna go Carrie plus Ron's should equal 24. Now, do you guys remember learning elimination was when they all matched up and you tried to get rid of one of them, okay? Another thing that we can do is we can take this and do substitution. This one actually is easier with substitution. I can take this 3R and put it in there for C, and then I'd have 3R plus R is 24. 3R plus R is 4R. Divide by 4, and R is 6, okay? They are asking us how many CDs does Carrie have? So if Ron has 6, this you probably would just do in your head, but Carrie would have 3 times as many as Ron, so Carrie would have 18. Now, if you just kind of thought about that as you go through, you could have done that with trial and error too. Like if you didn't know to write the equations, you could have figured it out too. All right, so now let's go here. One thing we haven't talked about yet is there's could be something where you're solving like a square root type question. Do you guys know how to get rid of a square root? Square it, right? So this would be squared and this would be squared. So this would just be x equals, and 16 squared is 256. Okay. Then, if we look at this one, we're solving an equation that has x squared in it. So if I go and I do x squared plus 49 equals 0, and I solve that, I'm going to subtract 49, and I get x squared equals negative 49. And then what would I do? Square root, okay? Now, if you guys go to your calculators and try to take the square root of a negative number, it's going to give you an error. And that is because you can't take the square root of a negative number. So if you guys went second square root, negative 49, it's going to say non-real answer. That's because you're going to learn something in Algebra 2 next year where there's imaginary numbers, and this would be one of them. So you can't take the square root of a negative number, so that would be no solution. Okay? So if you ever go to take a square root of a negative, it's going to be no solution. Okay, now we have one more like this. So we have 5x squared plus 20 equals 145. Okay, so we get 5x squared equals 125. Divide by 5. And x squared equals 25. Okay, then we take the square root. Now this is a place that I think maybe some of you would get this wrong. What do you guys think the answer would be? Like looking over there, what do you think? Would it be A or B? A lot of you might think it's just 5, but when you take the square root of a number, it's plus or minus that. So it would be 5 or a negative 5. The reason is, if you square 5, you get 25. If you square a negative 5, you get a positive 25. So it's 5 or a negative 5. Okay? Now, this says we have a square tarp, okay? And the area of it is 1,200. which shows how to find x, the length of the tarp. So do you guys get in a square, all four sides would be equal? So if I call this x, that would be x2. And if you go to find area, do you guys know that you just go like length times width? So that would be x times x, which is x squared, that's the area, and it would equal 1200, and then you would solve that. Okay, so our answer for this would be that one. Okay, then if I look here, this is another thing we haven't talked about that they could potentially ask you about, but they could give you a formula and ask you for one variable in the formula, so you have to solve that equation for that variable. And in this one, they want us to solve it for y, which is right here, okay? Now when you go to do this, what I would do first is clear out the bottom on this side, and how I would do that, I could multiply both sides by x minus u. Do you guys get that? And then this and that cancel, and on the left, I would probably put the little m in front, equals y minus v. Now I'm trying to solve for y, so to get rid of that v, we could just add it. And then I'd get y equals m times x minus u plus v. There's nothing else we could do with that because they're all different. And that is what, d? Okay, so you could very well get one like that too. So here we have a rectangle. You don't have to write this out, but let's say that the length is 7√3 and the width is 2√3. When you do the area of a rectangle, you can either think of it as base times height or length times width. Okay, so I would have 7√3 times 2√3. Okay, when you have something like that and they're multiplied, what you can do is multiply the 7 and the 2 together. So 7 times 2 is 14. And then I have square root of 3 times square root of 3. What is square root of 3 times square root of 3? It's just 3. Think of it as square root of 3 times square root of 3 would be square root of 9, which is 3. Okay, so this is just 14 times 3, which would be 42. So one thing to remember, square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2, square root of 4 times square root of 4 is 4, and so on. They just cancel the square roots out. All right, another thing is they will give you an equation, and they could ask you one of 4 things. They could say, which thing here is a coefficient? A coefficient is always something in front of a variable. So the coefficient here is 3, because it's in front of the x. A constant is just any number kind of at the end of an equation where it's either being added or subtracted. It's just a plain number, could be a decimal, could be a fraction, but it doesn't have a variable with it. The other thing that they're going to ask us for is which one's dependent and which one's independent. So first of all, one thing I want you to think about is f of x is the same thing as y. So don't let f of x, like, don't think that's weird. You can think of that just as y equals 3x plus 4. Now, if you think of this variable, or I'm sorry, this equation, whatever I put in for x is going to change my y. So because of that, f of x is dependent on what I put in for x. If I put 0 in there, it's going to be different than if I put 1 in there, and so on. So the f of x is your dependent, your x is independent, okay? Y or f of x is dependent, x is independent. So if we go down to this, it says if f of x equals this, which describes x? So x is going to be either dependent or independent. Which one is it? It's independent, right? Okay. The x is independent. What is f of x? F of x is dependent. It depends on what you put in for x. Then it says in this one, which is the independent variable? X or f of x? X, yes. Very good. Then if we go here, we're going to do a couple more like this. Which is the independent variable? It's h. Okay, independent is the x or the h. Okay, this one says the total cost of a book order, C, is dependent upon the number of books in the order, B. Which equation shows the cost as a function of the number of books? Okay, if the total cost is dependent on the number of books, what that means is you're going to have a function of the cost, because that depends on how many books we buy. Okay, so you want to find one that has the function is the cost, and then b is going to be multiplied by something. Okay, so do you guys get b has to be it, and it wouldn't be f of b equals b, it would be f of c equals b. So b there is independent, f of c is dependent on how many books you buy. That affects your cost. Do you guys get that? Okay. Here is one where they could have you just moving things into these boxes. So here, what's the coefficient? 7. What's our constant? 32. Which one depends on the other? F of w depends on our independent variable, which is w. So what you put in for w, f of w is dependent on that. Okay? Now, let's go to this page. So the last part of today, we're just going to go over a couple of area problems. And this would be something that you would have to know the area formulas for. So the area of a parallelogram is base times height. And the thing about a parallelogram is your height has to be perpendicular. So what that means is your height has to come down to the base and be parallel, perpendicular, okay? So if I look over here, what I want for my height is right there, and sometimes they're not going to give you that, okay? Does anyone see how I could find the height? Pythagorean theorem, right? So what I have here is this right triangle, and if you recognize that, you probably don't, but this is a Pythagorean triple, but if you don't recognize that, you're just gonna go a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I could say that a is my h, b is my 15, c has to be the one across from that. So this would be h squared plus 15 squared equals 25 squared, okay? 15 squared is 225. 25 squared is 625. And then you're gonna subtract 225. And we would get h squared equals 400. And then I'd have to take the square root of 400. And do you guys, I would think they'd let you use a calculator here, but do you know what number of times itself gives you 400? 20. Yeah, good. So that is 20. Oh, but that's not our answer yet. That is just our height. Okay? So what we have to do is find the area of that, which is base times height. Now, do you guys get it? This is 30, that this base would be 32, okay? So it'd be 30 times that height. What's 30 times 20? 600, very good. So this could be one they don't let you use a calculator on. Okay, if I look at this one, this is one I would think they have to use a calculator on because you have decimals and stuff. But this would be my base, okay? I need to find, this is my height, but what do I need? What is the length of, Z, okay? So this is 12. Could I find this distance right here? Yep. If the whole thing is 20.06, what do you think this would be for 12 plus that to be 20.06? Wouldn't it be 8.06? And what you can assume in this one, there's actually two ways you could think about this. You could think, well, if this height is 11.2, so is this height 11.2. And in a parallelogram, opposite sides are equal. So if that's Z, this is Z. And now I have this right triangle. The 11.2 is this, that's 8.06. So if I go and do a squared plus b squared equals c squared, a and b would be the 8.06 squared and the 11.2 squared, and c would be z squared, okay? Like I said, this one I'm like 99% sure that they're going to give you a calculator for. So we're gonna go 8.06 squared plus 11.2 squared, and that is my z squared. How would I then find z? Square root, right? Have I shown you guys this? If you go second square root, you can pull that number down by going second negative there. You don't have to do it that way, but it might save a little bit of time. So this is about 13.8, okay, which is right there. All right, now we have two more problems. Okay, so again, you kind of have to remember some of these formulas. So if you have note packets and you really want to do well, you could look through the packets and try to remember some of this stuff, but that's up to you. I can't make you do that. But you could try to look through things that you have and look at some of the things you have to memorize. So this is 1/2 for a trapezoid times the height times our two bases added together, okay? And we have this trapezoid. What is the area of it, okay? So the 1/2 you can put as 0.5. The height on these again has to be perpendicular, which the 12 is. And then it's B1 plus B2. So you can call one of the bases B1 and one of the bases B2, but it doesn't matter which one. And then this would be 30 plus 18. And then you can just, well, if you wanted to, you could simplify this a little more. 30 plus 18 is 48. And then you can put that in your calculator and go 0.5 times 12 times 48 is 288 feet squared. Okay. Then, last problem, okay? This is a right triangle and it wants the perimeter, okay? Now, what I would probably do if I were you guys is change these to decimals. So I think you all know 3/4 is 0.75. You may not know what 3/8 is, but you could just, if you had to do this, I would think they'd give you a calculator. So do you guys know to change 3/8 to a decimal, you can just go 3 divided by 8, and that's 0.375, I believe. Okay, did anyone try that? Okay, thank you. And then we have to find this side. So again, we're gonna do Pythagorean theorem, and this is my C. I'm gonna call this A and this B. So on this one again, I really think they'd give you a calculator. So A is x squared, B is 6.375 squared, and C is 8.75 squared. Okay, so if I go to my calculator, I can square 6.375 squared, and that is 40.64. And then I can square the 8.75. And you could skip this part and just do this squared minus that squared. That would have been fine. And then taken the square root. So if you know to subtract in that case, you certainly could do that. Okay. Now we're gonna subtract those two, and then we're gonna take the square root. So I'm gonna subtract 40.64. That gives me 35.92, and then I have to take the square root of that, which is 5.99, okay? So this was 35.92 square root, and x is 5.99. Now, one thing you have to notice here is they don't just want this distance, they want the perimeter. So what we have to do is add around. So we would add 8.75, 6.375, and 6. Is it 21.12? Yeah. Is that what you guys got? All right. So now I will give you the sheet. Sorry that got long, you guys. I think after today you have 28 days left.